Welcome back, Chappelle. Or, excuse me, welcome back, Honors, is what I should be saying. Just sitting around outside today. It's way too nice of a day outside to be cooped up, so I figured I'd record this flip out in my backyard. And Rufio, he's just chilling right now. He's over there laying down. Rufio, you not gonna get up and say hey? No? Maybe? No. Oh. And then the other one, of course, is out the back. But anyway, so we are talking today about well, first of all, I'll go ahead and give a shout out. I think you guys did such a good job at VooBoo. I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to the next one. Big shout out to Isabel, Brenna, Brittany, Ellie, and Jaden for doing a phenomenal job. I think you guys did the best job out of any performance at the entire thing. So well done. The costumes were fantastic. Y'all put everybody else to shame. And also, I just got back from STEM Fest, just kind of like shouting out the school and everything like that. We had our virtual reality goggles there, and we were just kind of showing them around, and watching so many kids react to how awesome that technology is making me so excited to use it with my class. But we started talking about in class the Roman government, right? So we're now in the Republic period of ancient Rome. We have left the kingdom period, right? And the kingdom period, really quick, if you want to jot this down somewhere, was characterized by a set of monarchs, right? So like we talked about in class, like the origin of Rome with Romulus and Remus and their story of being fathered by Mars, and then, Romulus stabs Remus to death after they have a bird watching competition and all the other stuff that we talked about is probably not, probably never happened, as we know. It's a myth. But Romulus may have been a king, right? So Romulus may have been the first king of Rome, right? And the kingdom period was defined by a set of about 7 kings. And then in 509 BC, as you can see right here, when they expelled the Etruscans out of Rome, they established a monarch, or not a monarchy, a republic system, right? And that's why the SPQR letters are so important to Rome. Senatus Populus Romanum, the Senate, the Roman Senate, and people, right? So the big thing about their entire setup, you have to understand Roman society before you can understand Roman government, right? So getting into it, though, let's go ahead and move my face down here real quick. There we go. So first and foremost, just so you know, Rome did have a loose set of laws, right? They were not formally used yet, but they were known as the 12 Tables or Roman law, which is a civil law that governed daily lives, right? So now, much later, and we'll talk about this later, but they're going to actually be codified on bronze tablets, and they're called the 12 Tables because there were 12 tablets. But Roman law was a loose civil law. It didn't apply to everyone equally, mainly because they had a different setup, and the unfortunate part about it is that there was no written constitution for the setup of Rome's government. It's a system of adopted beliefs, right? So there is nothing setting up any of this stuff in ancient Rome. The big thing about it is that it's all assumed, right? They established it in traditions over several hundred years, and the biggest setup about their entire government and society is their 2 social classes. So there are 2 huge social classes in Rome. And by huge, I don't mean large by number. I mean huge in importance, right? So the Patricians are the big one, okay? The Patricians are kind of like our honors girls, right? The landowning ruling class, right? The elites, the wealthy. They lead the military in war. They work in the Senate. They are the only ones who actually know the Roman law code because most other people can't read. Now, they also only take up, though, about 5 to 2% of the entire population of Rome. So they're very, very small, and they hold the absolute most power. Now, y'all can we see? Y'all can see me, right? Yeah. All right. So I'll just jot it over here just so we can make sure we can see everything. Now, the other big one are called the Plebeians, or as I like to say, Plebeians, because I think it sounds funnier and it's much more suiting to their social class name. And if you ever get bored in class and you want to call somebody an unaware person who is not educated, who also probably can't read or write or things like that, just call them a plebe. It's just a lot of fun, right? You have a sibling, call them a plebe. Now, anyway, plebes or plebeians are the common people of Rome. Everybody else, the regular, they are usually more likely to hold one of 4 different social classes. Hey! Stop eating that. Whatever it is. Quit. Sorry. Now, they can be either farmers, soldiers, craft workers, or merchants, right? They have a voice in the government, as in they can vote for certain things, but they cannot be elected to public office, right? They cannot be a consul or a senator or a no, they can't be tribunes, but it's later. And so, are you really laying down in the garden right now? Like, okay, that's fine. All right, so anyway, but they pay the bulk of the taxes, right? So this seems extremely unfair. 95% of your society can't function the way the other 5% can, makes less money, and pays most of the taxes, right? So this seems wildly unfair. And just to see some couple of quick pictures of these people, this is what you would imagine a patrician life would be like, right? Patricians ate very well, were very wealthy. They're the noble ruling class. They're an aristocracy, right? You're born into this class. You must marry within this class. So patricians must marry patricians and plebes must marry plebes. Also, which is really cool just to understand, this is how Romans would dine, especially patricians would dine. They actually did it laying down with little pillows across their chest, and they would eat everything from a seated position like that, and they ate everything with their hands, right? So these, on the other hand, are plebes, right? So, for example, this is me and Mr. Watterson about to hit each other with sticks, and I don't care what anybody says, that looks actually kind of like Mr. Watterson right there. And then, Mr. Mathern probably inhabits the patrician class. But the two plebes right here, as you can see, poor clothing, poor individuals, and just don't get to function the regular way that everybody else does in society. Now, this is the setup of the Roman Republic Phase 1, right? So what you should do real quick is you should pause the video real fast, okay? Fill these words in on the chart that we actually set up during class yesterday, and then hit play when you're ready for me to describe all these different individuals, all right? So go ahead and hit pause, and then we'll go after it, all right? All right, coming back into it right now. Okay, so filling in all these blocks and describing all these people's roles is very important. And yes, you do need to know these charts for your test whenever that day comes up, which will probably be not next week, but probably the week after. So this is the Roman Republic Phase 1, okay? The first and easiest person to talk about is actually, you know what? Let's change that up. We'll go to these two people right here, okay? The consuls, okay? The consuls are the two most important people, now I didn't say powerful, but most important people in Rome, okay? So the consuls are elected by these people down here, the citizen assemblies, right? So the consuls actually get voted into office, okay? The consuls run the entire government, they watch over it, and they make sure it's running efficiently. Now at the Phase 1 of the government, both of the consuls had to be patricians. They serve for 1 year. They run the military, they run the taxation, and they run basically the entire government, right? The consuls, though, also have two other very important jobs. If a war breaks out, as you can see right here, one of them will be elected a dictator who has complete ruling authority. During that time of war, whatever the dictator says goes. And after the war is over, he is supposed to resign back into consulship, where he will then eventually work his way back into the Roman government, right? So speaking of working your way back into the Roman government, the consuls have another important job. They select the Senate. The Senate is not voted upon by the citizen assembly. It's selected by the consuls, right? So it's kind of an unspoken rule in Rome that the consuls always selected former consuls to be senators, right? Or other wealthy ruling class landowners, right? The Senate ruled for life. They are really, logistically speaking, the most powerful governing body in Rome. Technically, they're not supposed to be allowed to do anything, but they secretly do everything. They're supposed to be a group that advises the consuls and actually helps them structure the government, whereas the consuls are allowed to pass certain things. They can actually veto one another. Like one consul, if they don't agree with what the other one's saying, they can outrank them and say, well, no, we're not doing that. And they can veto one another, right? Remember that word veto. It's very important. But they select the senators who rule for life, and all of the major laws start in the Senate. The Senate actually drafts them up, reviews them, and makes sure that they are ready to be issued. So the consuls select the senators, and then the citizen assembly elects the consuls, right? The citizen assembly is basically just small groups of individuals, mostly patricians, that are there to vote for the consuls and advocate for their sector of the Roman area, right? Sometimes they're governors, sometimes they're ruling landowners from different areas that live maybe outside of Rome itself, right? So that's the first phase of the government. Then you also had these people outside of it. You have a couple other people that exist outside of the Roman government as well. that do have major like impact on it. Like, for example, the praetors or the magistrates they're like the governors of different provinces or military leaders. They are right underneath the consuls, and there's about 8 of them, right? So again, they have more power than the Senate, but we all know in the long run, the Senate actually has more power than they do. Some of you are like, I don't know what's going on, I'm very confused, but it's okay, you'll see, okay? But as you can tell, this entire setup of their Roman government is very screwed up because only patricians are really participating in any of it at all, right? And the patricians also, joke's on you, are inherently a little bit afraid of the plebs, right? The plebs just don't realize it. The patricians are afraid of the plebeians because there's so many of them. And at any given moment, if they wanted to rise up and revolt, they could. And all they got to do is grab sticks and they're going to destroy them. Also, if you saw back on the other slide, plebs are all soldiers. So when Rome wants to go to war, it needs an army of plebs to do so. The patricians are just the generals, the ones calling the shots, right? So the plebs had very few rights, but the patricians are much more intelligent than they are. And so to keep this mob of plebeians happy, the patricians would build large things to keep them distracted. And the most famous one that was built is actually called the Circus Maximus, right? The Circus Maximus was a sporting arena, okay? So jot that down. The Circus Maximus was a sporting arena, and the main event you would go to see is actually chariot racing, right? So the chariot races would actually take place, and before the chariots would start, there'd be jugglers and magicians and small gladiatorial fights and things like that. But it was a huge, huge, huge event, and a lot of people referred to it as bread and circuses, right? So the Circus Maximus was where the plebes were kept distracted from the goings-on of their government, right? Because people, like usually the patricians, would keep them happy with entertainment and games, right? And the Circus Maximus is actually still there in a sense, but it's all in ruin, unfortunately. I know, Tori, I know that you're very upset about this. I am upset as well. All right, so this is what's left of the Circus Maximus, which at one point looked like this, now unfortunately looks like this, right? It's now actually a huge city park in Rome, where you can actually walk through the entire thing. This is me actually standing down inside the Circus Maximus, and that's where the old chariot racetrack used to be. And these are two people that think I'm a weirdo because I'm taking a picture and they think it's of them, but it's actually not. So, and then this is another view from outside of the Circus Maximus, and that right there is actually Palatine Hill, where over 100 years later, the emperors are going to live right above the Circus Maximus. So, as you can see, Circus Maximus and these big sports arenas are very important things. But then when people start to realize something, they're like, wait a minute. We're Romans, we're plebeians, things are starting to get a little bit better. Some of us are starting to grow much more intelligent, right? Some of us can read, some of us are wealthy, some of us can write, but I still can't marry a patrician, and I still don't have any rights when it comes to my government, and I still can't vote all the time, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So then what broke out was known as the struggle of the orders. Put a star next to that, it's very important. The struggle of the orders was over 100 years of time, from about like give or take like what I think about like give or take like around 400 BC to about like close to 100 BC. It's over 100 years of political reform where the plebes are starting to realize that they don't have the rights that they deserve, considering that the economy rests completely on their shoulders. The military rests completely on their shoulders, and everything hinges on their willingness to do it, right? So the struggle of the orders is going to break out, and what a lot of plebes are going to do is they're going to start boycotting, right? Jot that down. They begin to boycott the military and the economy. They start refusing to work or refusing to fight. And so eventually what happens is over time, new laws are going to be passed and new orders are going to be added. Plebes are going to be allowed to marry the patricians. The 12 tables, jot this down, is going to be posted in the forum. Even though most plebes couldn't read, it's still much more fair because they could reference the law code that was actually putting them under, or the law code of which they had to follow was now posted so it could be read in a public venue, right? And the biggest thing about the Roman government, though, and this is the last slide that we're going over, is the tribunes are going to be added. So this is the phase 2 of the Roman government, right? And this is why the Roman government is so amazing, because of its easeability to change, right? So go ahead again and pause this real fast, and then unpause it, and then get all this stuff down, and then we're going to talk about it, and you'll add a couple little descriptors to each thing. All right, so go ahead and hit pause. All right, and welcome back. All right, so now a lot of these things are going to stay very, very same, right? So, but the consuls are still going to be the same. There's going to be 2 of them. Mostly, they're usually patricians out front, and even by 27 BC, 1 consul was a patrician and 1 was a plebe, because as the struggle of the orders continues to roll forward, the plebes begin to gain more power. Now, the dictator still always was one of the consuls and had to be the patrician consul. The Senate still ruled for life, but their numbers kept beginning to grow. At one point, right before Augustus, there were over 900 senators. So they still are the most powerful group in all of Rome. The praetors still exist, which they're like, they're the military leaders and the governors. They're the magistrates, right? And then the citizen assembly is still the same. But this big guy right here is very important. The tribunes, the council of the plebes, right? So 10 tribunes, all plebeians, would be elected to exist basically as the Senate for the plebeians, right? So the plebeians would vote them into office from the citizen assembly, and they were given the massive power of the veto, right? Now, just so you know, in Latin, veto means to send back, right? So the tribunes were now given the power to veto anything coming out of the Senate that was unfair to their group of people, right? That was unfair to the plebes. So that is a massive power, right? So the praetors are going to still exist, and then they're going to add a couple of other like random little things. For example, like the quaestors are judges. They would actually hold trials before juries and actually introduce this idea called habeas corpus, which means having the body of proof if someone has committed a crime, right? And then censors are going to be added as well, which for some reason it didn't save the thing that I was writing, but censors were actually people that monitored the activity of all of these other elected officials, right? They monitored the consuls and the senators and the tribunes, and if they were acting up or being corrupt, they could lose their job because the censors were there to make sure they didn't act out. Just like our FCC censors our material and makes sure that our mass media doesn't act out, right? That's where the word actually comes from. All right, but that's it. That's our weekend flip. That's the Roman government. I will see you guys on Monday, and we're going to talk about the Punic Wars, right, that some of you already knew about, and the Roman wars with Carthage, right? So I'll see you guys then. Have a great weekend. Can't wait to see you guys.